I'm Laura Cummings from White Birch Books, and I'm here today at Sun TV with Ed Minyard to talk about his most recent book, Complacency, One Man's Story. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about this.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So, complacency. Tell me about it. Give me, what they call in the business the elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch. Yeah, I've never been good with elevators, except when I worked on the 98th floor. I had a little working room.
There you go. There you go.
So complacency, one man's story. So it really comes out of my 40 plus years experience in the arena of risk and disaster response and crisis management and that sort of thing. I like to say that I was doing disaster preparedness and response before it was popular, before it was a term of art, right?
Okay.
And IT and so on and so forth. But what happens in those situations is in many cases we are out in the world responding to disasters in real time.
Right.
And those of us that are in the trenches look around at one another saying, man, if this went one more step, boy, it could really get tough. So looking at the world that we currently live in and all of the insanity that's going on from our own country to the rest of the world.
Right.
I really sort of took all of that experience and looked at all of the rest of this and saying, well, this is what might happen. This is what could happen. And many of the examples in the book and the scenarios in the books are things that I've actually had experience with.
Okay.
Some are a little more, artistic license.
A little heightened.
Yes, exactly. And then to take it a little further, and I have given presentations for ages on preparedness. Getting people's attention is the hard part. So my thought was if I could put it in the scope of a novel where people might be entertained by it, and then finish it off with some directions on how you might be better prepared in your own life and give some guidance in that space, maybe it would be a bit more impactful. So that was a little longer than an elevator pitch, but it still gets you the point across.
Well, that's okay. So you thrill them, scare them, and then teach them.
Indeed, that's a good way to put it. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your main character in this book is Michael Conrad.
Michael Conrad.
A good everyman.
Yes.
Okay. So he lives in Bartlett in this book?
Yes, he does. He lives in Bartlett in this book on a compound that is mostly mythical out there, because 100 acres in Bartlett and with some of the accoutrement that he has on the facility would be a bit of a stretch, but it's all doable. Everything that I've articulated in the book that exists on that compound is real world technology and really possible in the world. And some of it's actually deployed in certain places around the country, even now.
Even with his 100 acres, he'd have a low tax rate in Bartlett.
Yes, lower, which by the way is why I live in Bartlett. But that's a different story. Yeah.
So he's up there. So what role in does Bartlett or the Valley play? Because I think that's what's fun about some of these local books, when you recognize like a place or a person sometimes, or just something when you're reading a book, when you recognize a local place. I think that's fun as you're reading along. Go, wait, I know that.
Sure.
So what part does the Valley play?
So the Valley plays an important part in the book. So
Okay.
Michael is a global operator in the realm of disaster response and preparedness and operations and that sort of thing. But his home is in the Mount Washington Valley. And I think if you look around, you will find a lot of former military people in the Mount Washington Valley. You'll find a lot of people with a more resilient mindset in the Mount Washington Valley. And, live free or die in a tax-free state doesn't hurt, all right, when it comes to making decisions that we're going to live. So, I like the concept of write what you know. I personally moved up here in 2006 when I married my wife, Joy Tarbell. And I've come to love the place, and I love it for all of those same reasons. You've got resources, you've got people who have a resilient mindset, you've got friendly people. I think you have the ability to have a survivable environment should anything actually occur in this regard. So in this case, this is where Michael's compound is. This is home base for him. Certainly, I don't believe that he expected all of the things to come around in the book. But in the course of that, he starts to develop these relationships throughout the valley with people and looks at the geography of the valley to make it a more defensible situation from some of the things that are put upon us.
I see. Does he ever go to his favorite local bookstore?
I'm sure he goes there quite frequently. Okay. Yes, indeed. I mean, why wouldn't he? You know, at the end of the day, right?
Because that makes a very good home.
Yes.
I mean, that's something you have to look for.
Yeah.
As you say, you have to write what you know. And you can't just make a lot of this up. And so you, as you said, you're drawing on some very extensive experience here, 40 years. So how does somebody start in something like this? Do you just show up like, oh, there was a hurricane and you just show up with a broom one day? I mean, how does somebody get started in something like this?
People do that. To be in the end of it that I am, you start by having about half your brain cells sucked out because you can't be of a solid mind and want to do what I've done for 20 plus years on the ground and 20 plus years prior in other aspects. But as far as contributing and helping, faith-based organizations, the American Red Cross, all of these organizations do have volunteer programs, and they do work to help train people. The problem in many disasters is that the humanitarian heart kicks in, and you want to rush in and help. But unless you've got some experience and something that you know you're bringing to that table, you have just as big a chance of becoming a part of the problem as it's a part of the solution. Now, you need to be sheltered. You need to be fed. You need to take advantage of some of these resources which were already scarce before you ever showed up. But getting affiliated with an organization to do it, I mean, group of rednecks that I happened to run into down in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, the Cajun Navy. It all started with the fact that everybody with a boat showed up. And every entrance ramp to an interstate which was flooded became a boat ramp. And they were picking people off rooftops. And they began to organize that, and now they're one of the most effective groups. The Cajun Navy it's not 501c3, and they're a very effective group to get out there, and they work all over the world now. So, but getting tuned in, you can start any way you want to start, but certainly if you've got something to bring to the table, it's always good to be able to offer it up.
Right. Yeah. So how did you get into it?
Well, it was, as I said, I'd been in the world of disaster preparedness and response when it came to information technology systems for decades, because it was a natural part. If I designed a network, I had to also be able to design a means for it to work if something were to break. Right? So disaster recovery was the term of art. In that space, and then of course cybersecurity came along, and that was about protecting things. When 9/11 occurred, I was living in New York, and I was working for a large company at that time, and our clients were the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and all of the financial houses, Bank of New York, Lehman Brothers, Salomon Brothers, and others. So when those towers came down, it was all hands on deck, and we began to help to restore the business practices of all of our clients down there. And it gave me a view that this work I had been doing up to this time with IT and disaster recovery could be more meaningful. And then I started working very closely with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who owned the Twin Towers and were very responsible for all that, and helping them to deal with some of the issues they faced with communications on the ground. Put together some systems for them that they still use, some variation of this day. It's been a long time, so technology shifts, but still it was another opportunity to see. And then flash forward to Katrina, I had all this gear. I'm hearing cries for help coming up out of New Orleans, and I basically told my boss, I'm going. I'm taking this gear. I know it can be helpful. We made some contacts, and it was. I covered that in my first book, which I did a presentation at your beautiful bookstore on after disasters. But the bottom line is I realized then that the hook was set. When you can see impact on human beings and help how you can help those people in a dire situation, I didn't have it in my heart not to stay involved in that. So
Right.
I resigned from Unisys Corporation, started my own business doing exactly that.
Right.
So
So it's more the helping set up the communication and
started out with that. It
okay.
did. It started out with setting up satellite communications where
Okay.
there was no other type of communications
Right.
available, which meant also that we had to bring a generator because usually there wasn't electricity either.
Right.
So, starting off with that to understand it. And then it evolved into other issues like base camps for first responders
Okay.
and for shelterees when people
Right.
have no place to go. Teaming with a couple of companies that had massive tents and equipment to build those camps. But what was missing was A, the communications technology, but B,
Okay.
and more importantly, an ability to account for the people that were in those facilities. So, I've got 2,000 people. Nice to know,
Right.
that they're okay, who they are, where they're
Right.
from. So I designed a system to do that as well, and that became and still is
Right.
sort of the system of record for FEMA and for Homeland Security and for Health and Human Services and others to
Right.
be able to provide that. So in that case, you were able to really show, for example, Hurricane Sandy. We built two 4,000 person base stations for shelterees in Hurricane Sandy. Immediately, the local politicians wanted to know how many of my constituents are in here, how many of them might have medical conditions, and all of that. So we were able to provide that
Right.
data in real time through these systems, and it really made a difference.
So part of that is like somebody has to, there's probably like a whole checklist. And so you can't go running around screaming like, a crazy person. So somebody with a sane level head has
Yes.
to get in there, kind of assess, and then just start going
Go
down
right
the
through it, and
list.
that's what's people lose the fact that a good friend of mine, Colonel Terry Everett, Marine Corps Colonel, Navy Cross recipient, a true hero of the Vietnam War, a rock star, this guy, when it comes to crisis.
Right.
Hurricane Katrina, he was responsible for the Department of Homeland Security for the city of New Orleans. And by the time I got there, Terry was a basket case because his entire house was destroyed. His family, he was a victim, and he was responsible for recovery. So in those cases, you don't think clearly. So you
Right.
bring in folks
Right.
like myself and my team who are doing what you said. We're
Right.
working off guidelines and checklists, and we're going by the book, and we're trying to stay one step emotionally detached
Right.
during the day while you're working on it.
Right.
And then downstream that at night
Right.
to keep your own sanity in check.
Right.
And that whole third party, outside, somewhat detached resource is critical
Right.
in these cases.
And then the more you go through, the more you add to your checklist. And
Absolutely, you
as
learn
you
every
hit-
time, right?
Yes.
Every time every disaster is unique.
Yes.
And every disaster, I don't care, everybody talks about global disaster, every disaster is local. Because the challenges in the valley in a situation like the recent flooding that we
Right.
had
Right.
is different than the global perspective on
Right.
it, and it's more meaningful on a personal level to the people who are affected by it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you watch that, and it's interesting what you said, how everybody wants to help. I mean, we see that all the time. It's like everybody wants to send clothes or food or
Sure.
whatever, and then you see that it just is sitting somewhere or whatever.
We had warehouses full of backpacks full of school supplies
Right.
in New Orleans for 5 years after the
Right.
event. You again, you can become a part of the problem
Right.
just as easy as you're trying to be part of the solution. So my recommendation to people is don't send stuff, send money to a bona fide, vetted nonprofit organization that can then use that in the way that it needs to be used.
Right.
Might not be what you want to send them,
Right.
So yeah,
It is always hard, and to get that information out quickly and effectively and everything is always hard. I think we saw that in Hawaii. I
Yes.
feel like that information got out quickly there.
yeah.
Who to send it to, and and what to send. I feel like though that information came out quickly
Yeah.
there. So when you go, so you had your own company, and so did you attach to like either government or nonprofit or whoever needed you type
well,
of thing?
most of our work was done under the banner of one or another government agency.
Okay.
So, for hurricane response, for example, it was most of the time it was FEMA. Sometimes
Okay.
it was a state government and
Okay.
their entity. For the crisis at the border, the migrant situation, we built shelters for unaccompanied alien children around and operated them. And we worked for the Office of Refugee Resettlement under Health and Human Services. We were one of the first contractors under Operation Warp Speed for the Department of Defense and building quarantine facilities and vaccine facilities all around the country. So
Oh, wow.
when everybody else was hiding in quarantine, myself and my teams were out building
When people
facilities.
were wiping down their groceries.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, but it was like that. I mean, when the first group of expats got off the plane from Wuhan, they came
Yeah.
from there to our facility at Marsh
Okay.
Air Force Base.
Huh.
The Diamond Princess cruise ship, everybody heard about.
Right.
They got off that boat and they came to my facility.
They were
built
just
them
glad
all.
to get off that boat.
Oh yeah, and I can't
Yes.
blame them, you know. And but yeah, I mean, it just depends. And in many
Wow.
cases, we did work for, when I worked for nonprofits, Eagles Wings Foundation is a classic example. When we went into Haiti, I went with them, and that not only did I not get paid, it cost me a lot of money to
Yeah.
go support that mission. But
Right.
we delivered 8.5, I think, million meal rations in a week down there, hand to
Right.
hand,
Yeah.
in some of the most dire situations I've been in since Vietnam. But yeah, in those cases, we did work for nonprofits to try
Right.
to help, but that wasn't for money.
Right.
That was for the humanitarian side of
Right.
things.
Right.
Right.
So I kind of picture that you have like a red phone in your house. So
Actually, I have an iPhone 14. That's worse than a red phone. You can
Like
walk away from the red phone.
like a red phone under a case, and
Yeah.
like you're eating a nice meal, and then you hear the red phone in the other room, and
Yeah, well,
you get into your special outfit, and a
it's just-
helicopter picks you up.
I actually took helicopter flying lessons so that I could do my own thing, but it didn't go very far.
Okay.
But Joy got a little tired of me. Hey, honey, I won't be home for dinner tomorrow or for the foreseeable future.
I'm going down to the disaster.
Yeah, I mean, but it was like that. We were, my teams and I were on call,
Yeah.
7 by 24, and our contracts required us to be wherever they pointed 24 hours
Right.
later, except when we had to go to Saipan and Tinian, we had 48 hours to get there. And then we had to have a fully operational facility within 72 hours.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was, that's just the way it was. It's hard to have a life when you don't know when that phone's going to go off.
Right. Right. So are you still doing this? Are you retired? The red
Yes,
phone has been put
I
away?
sold my business, including the red phone, at the end of 2020. So Joy and I had talked about that, and
Yeah.
at the beginning of 2020, I made myself a new company ID card that says expires December 31st, 2020.
Yeah.
And through the good graces of the Lord and a good friend, my company was acquired, right at the end of the year. And I still do some SWAT team kind of work for them. I mean, they call me up to go do a special mission here and a special mission there. I continue to do cybersecurity consulting for private
Okay.
sector and public sector companies as well as it. But sleeping in tents and sharing a porta potty with a few hundred people I've never met before is kind
Okay.
of, I've moved that
That's
to the back.
done.
Yeah.
That's done. So when
Yeah.
you see a disaster, you don't.
Don't even talk about that.
Okay,
part.
you
Yeah,
don't
no. When I
itch
see a
to-
disaster, the blood starts boiling, and I
Okay.
start foaming at the mouth and chomping at the bits and want to get engaged in doing something. And I still, I spend a lot of time on phones and organizing
Right.
a lot of stuff for Hawaii as well. I was on the phones and organizing, and my phone starts ringing.
Right.
And I get a lot of calls from people who want me to go,
Right.
and it's hard for me to say no. I can't. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I
Because
can't
the
make that
experience
commitment.
doesn't go away, but
The experience doesn't go away, and I'm able to offer that
Right.
experience and advisory from the house, which is
right.
better. I mean, it's one of those things where you can say, all right, I'll commit to 10 days, and then you get there, and it's like, yeah,
Right.
I can't do it in 10 days.
Right.
You know.
Right. because yes, totally, I do, yes, you do have to, because you can, there's Zoom, there's technology that
Yeah,
allows you to be there
right,
without having to be there.
right.
I'm sure Joy appreciates it. So you mentioned your previous book, The After Disaster, and in a previous conversation, you were talking about maybe updating that
Yes.
and bringing that back out with some updates and adding to it with
Yeah, I published After Disasters, An Insider's Perspective from the Heart of Chaos. I published that in 2012.
oh yeah,
And so I got involved in a few more things after
right,
2012.
unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, and it's what's the old it's alluded to be a Chinese curse, but I can't find any sources for that.
Right.
But may you live in interesting times.
Yes.
And sadly, we have lived in many interesting times.
Right.
And there's some good stories to tell. And in that book, you may or may not recall, but not only it's laying out not only what happens in these disasters, because there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. You've got the heroes, and as Mr. Rogers says, the helpers, and then you've got the people who are not so helpful and are trying their best to take advantage of it. And in the book, skating on the razor's edge of libel, and
Right.
I never published anything that wasn't already published by a major periodical, but I don't hold back as to what has happened, because what you have is an opportunity to learn from that.
Right.
You have an opportunity to be aware and not to be taken advantage of. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Guarantee it. So yes, so I'm in the process now of reworking that book and plan to add some more items and re-release it. And, since I've started writing, I've actually written 2 other books as well, that are not about disasters. Well, there's some disasters in it, but and maybe writing it was a disaster. I don't know, but The Case is the first of the novels, and then its sequel, Decisive Judgment, is another, right? And one technical book on developing and conducting tabletop exercises for cybersecurity work, simply because I needed to keep my CEUs up for my certifications.
Oh,
right?
there you go. There you go. So as a big proponent of being prepared,
Yes.
okay, and so if you were going to give some tips, just a couple, like if you could think of a couple big tips and maybe a couple little tips, because as they say, just if everybody was just a little more prepared, then we would all just be that one step better off for if anything happened.
Right.
And if everybody was just a little better off, then it wouldn't we just be better?
Right.
Yes.
No, it's 100%. I mean, and the strain on society, large and small, is eased if more people are prepared and are thinking about it. You don't have to be a prepper.
Right.
It's my son said to me, "Dad, my friends think you're a prepper," and I said, "Well, no, but I am prepared."
Right.
So it's about how far do you want to go with it, and you have to look at that from what you yourself are philosophically prepared to do.
Right.
So yes, large and small. I mean, the first thing is we like to say in the art of Taekwondo, I'm a 9th degree black belt in Taekwondo, we like to say we have 9 weapons, right?
Okay.
Our feet, our knees, our hands, our elbows, and the 9th is your mind.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the most important one.
Right.
So you need to be thinking of, look around you, and not just local, but look broader.
Okay.
And recognize that, what can you know, and maybe something you should be paying a little more attention to. I mean, we all had a real good jump start with COVID, right? I mean, toilet paper, paper towels, pick a sanitary product.
Right.
So should you have some of that stashed around? Well, yeah, you probably should. A lot of junk mail coming in the mailbox right now. I mean, you could, get plenty of opportunity to save some paper, but but yes, I mean, I think that you think about the things that make you live long, right?
Right.
One of them is, and the most important one, is water. So how can you be prepared to ensure that you will have clean water, right? So the basic thing is if you know something's coming, and by the way, I think a hurricane is the only thing you can see coming, or a major weather system that might impact you. We always recommend fill your bathtub with fresh water.
Right.
It'll come in handy in more ways than you might imagine. But you need to drink. You need to have water. Secondly, you know, in that same vein is because you don't know what your water source might be, consider buying an inexpensive life straw. It's a filtering system that you can basically drink out of a mud puddle with it, and it filters it out. People who are camping and hiking in the woods, most are going to have them already. Right. So you need to think like that. There are larger scale systems too, particularly a solution called a Berkey filter. I don't really want to go in. I'm not here to pump the volume on Berkey, but it's a brand name that you can Google or look up on Amazon. And it's gravity fed. So you dump a bucket of unclean water in the top, and it drains through a set of filters and comes out in the bottom as you know, surgically pure water. And it's not reverse osmosis, so it's not taking any minerals out. It's just cleaning all the bacteria and everything else out of the water. But it's something that doesn't take power to run, which is important.
Right.
You know, in that vein, how do you get your water? So if you're on city water, that's one thing. They still have to pump it to you. Right. You know, but if you're on a well, how are you protecting that well pump? How are you protecting, you know, the ability to power that well pump? So there are lots of inexpensive, small solar generators with a solar panel that are not overly expensive. But if I have a well, and I do, there would be solar, and there is, you know, to be able to just have that one thing to go forward. And then, you know, again, if you're thinking about the longer term preparedness, you need to think about what you're going to eat as well. Joy and I are both plant-based diet folks, so you know, we can grow our own, but it's still a little more challenging to, if you're going to buy dehydrated foods these days. But it's clearly there's some great opportunities out there, and I list some of them in the book, where we talk about sources for that sort of thing that give you the ability to survive. And you know, FEMA will tell you, if you go in and look at the FEMA website, and it's another great tip is to go on that you know, FEMA website, and the links are in my book as well, so that you can make a plan. How are you going to conduct yourself in a situation should it occur? Hopefully you never have to crack the cover on it. But if you do, it'd be good to have it, right? But FEMA will tell you, be prepared to be on your own for at least 72 hours. I say a week. Because I've seen it, and I've seen how hard it is to get to everybody in that 72 hours. Make sure when you're thinking about that, that you're not just thinking about those basics of food and water, but what about any medications that you might have or might need? Know who in your area might need your help. Who do you know that maybe isn't able to get out and get to the store or get to the drugstore and get their medications or whatever? Be a resource for that person. But you know, you start thinking about these things of, you know, what do you have in your car? Winter weather up here particularly, right? Look where we're sitting right now. Every one of my kids got go bags for Christmas years ago, and they get refreshed you know, about every other Christmas. Having something in your car that'll get you home, some water, something warm, a space blanket or whatever, you know, a means to take care of yourself if you get stranded on the road or go off the road. You know, God forbid that should occur, but or maybe somebody else has. Having that kind of just a little bit of forethought in there so that you become one that's just a little more self-resilient as opposed to being victimized and having to call 911. Hope you get through.
So you're not the one that needs help, hopefully, so you could be the person who could maybe help your neighbor.
Absolutely right. Exactly.
And everything, yes, which is what always reminds me of my father in the winter. You know, you cannot let your car get, you know, down so low with the gas.
Yes. Yeah. We have a rule in our house: never to a quarter tank. So you know,
I'm just like, but why? And it's like, so that is like the thing that's always, which is a small thing, but yes, and I had talked to somebody else, and he was like, "What about your pets?" I mean, the Hawaii thing brought home to me people carrying their children and their pets into the ocean, and I was looking at my 3 very large cats and imagine carrying them into the Saco.
Right?
And
Yeah,
I was like,
in a fire situation, sure. You know,
yes.
you find strength you might not think you
Well,
have. But
I was trying to tell them that we're not all going to make it.
that sometimes, sadly, is also the case.
Yes.
And you know, that's the one that you don't like to think about. So
Right.
you try to be as prepared as you can, but just, you know, it's,
Yes.
the first, you know, as they always say, the best plan goes straight to hell when the first bullet flies.
Right.
So I
Right.
guess we're
yes,
wrapping up.
we're running out of time. So, but I think we could talk about this stuff all day. But with that, I think we'll just call it here.
Great.
So, anyway, so this was fantastic. Thank you for your time today. Again,
My pleasure.
could
Thank you for having me.
talk about it all the time. So your book is Complacency. It's available at White Birch Books, and it was great talking to you here on Sun TV. And yeah, so thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.